Hello again. This is the final video talk. The last time you will see my face on the screen, I think, or maybe whatever. And this is to help prepare for the final essay. As you know by this point, I've been doing this for each of the exams, and I'm doing this here for the final essay because the final essay is a bit different from the four exams that you've now completed. Um, those are exams. This is an essay. And certainly the exams, there is that essay part and part two of the exams. And some of that certainly applies to the final essay as well, in that you still need to make a historical argument to present your case. And there still is parameters that are given to you. So this is not simply what did you think about the course? This is not simply what did you think about world history, but it gives you a structure and you will need to frame your argument within that structure. The question, if you've looked at it at all, and I certainly hope you have, because as you know, it says, and as I think I mentioned, this is really a semester-long project. The final essay. It's not intended for you to, finish exam four, and then have a week to get ready to write the final essay. Now, obviously, if you haven't already looked at the final essay and have been thinking about it, and this is the first time, let's say you just submitted your fourth exam, and then you click on this and you think, oh my God, I'm supposed to have been looking at this all semester. That's okay. You still have a week. You can do it. I certainly would expect because the exam builds on everything you've done to this point. It's kind of a way to put it all together. And so there's no new information that is required for the final essay. It is kind of, as I say in the question itself, it's in some ways, how do you implot the course? Perspectives on the world, until approximately 1800. Would you put that together for yourself based on what has been presented to you in the textbook and the lectures? That's what it's getting at. Now, if you just approach it and look at the question, you think, oh my God, it's almost a page long, single spaced. How can I make heads or tails or any sense out of that whatsoever? The guide to writing the final, the document that's posted, I think is a help for that. And in many ways, I'm not going to be saying anything here now that is not already in that guide. At least by intent, I'm not implicitly or explicitly in that guide. So let's just look through it again. Let's start with the question. I'm not going to read you the entire question. Um, but if you would have it up in front of you, we could go through it. Because the first part of the question is kind of setting the stage. It's saying, okay, how have humans been described? What do we see when we look at the history, the development of human cultures and civilizations throughout the world? And then it gets to some of the specifics. How do we account for the diversity and the similarity? In some ways, that is what this is getting at. It's not saying that, oh, we're all the same, but it's asking you, is there something about being human, regardless of what culture or civilization you're a part of, regardless of background? Is there something about being human that is common to all human beings and has been common to all human beings since at least the emergence of Homo sapiens? In some ways, the first exam question was getting at this. Is there something, a human nature that is common? And then, if so, how do we explain the diversity of human cultures and civilizations? How does that all work? So, if we only took one side of this, I mean, in terms of diversity and commonality, let's say, if we only looked at the commonality, we're not going to grasp the differences in diversity. And today, diversity is an important term and concept, and it is inherently needed for respect and dignity of peoples. But yet, it also means that there can be conflict. When people are all the same, there's rarely conflict. It's the differences that causes conflict. It is the realization that you, I don't mean you sitting here watching this, but the other, you have something that I don't have, and I want it, and I think I should have it. I think I'm equal to you. Well, on what basis do we consider ourselves equal? Is it because we believe that every human being is created in God's image as a child of God? Do we believe that there is something inherent in human beings called human rights? That's why that human rights, the last lecture and the last exam is so important in my mind. Because if there is something that is there that we have rights just by being human, when we look at the world today, how often are those rights not being recognized, not being allowed, being suppressed, being, everything to do to other people to prevent other individuals from having those inherent rights? And then is it really inherent, or are rights given by something, the government or God or some other type of thing that gives us our rights? Or is it simply from being human? But then if we have rights that aren't being respected, are those really rights? Because what difference would it make? That's what this question is getting at. What is the source of conflict if we're all the same? And I don't mean same as in identical, that we all look alike and all that, but there's something that is basic about human nature that is, in some ways, the thesis behind the concept of human rights. That there is something about being human that is common to all human beings. If that's the case, how do we explain the conflict? How do we explain the diversity, not so much in that positive nature in terms of respect and embracing diversity, but in that negative aspect of, I want what you have, and I don't like you. Because why? You are different than I am. I don't like you. So that it goes both ways there. It's in many ways, it's like so many things. There's a positive aspect to it and a negative aspect to it. Obviously, in the discourse today about diversity, we're looking at the positive aspect to it, the embracing differences as a way of celebrating the uniqueness and diversity of human beings, even though there is a substance there somehow that is common. Now, anyway, I'm not going to go into all of those aspects. And certainly, I promise you, there's no conscious, in a way, political program behind this, because it can go both ways. It is simply trying to look at and analyze what we experience and see. And today, the fact that the discourse with diversity is all about the positive sides of it. When we look throughout the world and the development and the conflicts have arisen, those are all too based on diversity. Because you are not us. You do not look like us. You do not act like us. We want what you have, or you want what we have, and we're going to fight to get it one way or the other. Yeah. That's what the question is getting at. Saying, okay, point one, is there something in human nature, in just being human, whether it's human rights or whatever it might be, that is common? And if so, how do we see that in these various manifestations of human culture and civilization, from the origins of hominid, or at least Homo sapiens, not all hominids necessarily, but all Homo sapiens, to approximately 1800? So that is where that stipulation, the question, okay, you need to talk about ancient cultures, development of cultures, those four parts, which I referenced to the textbook, the titles, but they're also the four parts of the lectures and how they combine, up to about 1800. Now, that's a huge task, and that's just the first part of the task. Because making sure that you talk about cultures or civilizations and and geographically diverse in the ancient world, in the developing medieval world from the Western perspective, in the emergence of the early modern world, in this last period, this transition period to the emerging modernity, and another change of paradigm where this course ends approximately 1800. And is there geographical differences? Why is it that Chinese civilizations and cultures develop differently from quote unquote Western civilizations and cultures, or Indian civilization and cultures different from quote unquote Western? And what does it mean about Latin and South America, or even let's say Mexico, Latin America, and South America? They're all geographically West, but they are the developments of civilization there part of Western culture, or is it something different? And certainly, um, if we just use that marker of east west, that is problematic because, again, as I've stressed, I think determining what is east and what is west is relative to the person making that determination. So, what is it that makes for the diversity of human cultures and civilizations? So, I'm asking you to address that question with different geographical territories. So I think, do I specify? I'm just going to go check here to think if I specify. Um, let's see, humans. Uh-oh, I just messed up a little bit. It's okay. I hope you're still with me. Answer this question, essay, 7 to 10 pages minimum, based on the course material, civilizations and cultures from 1, the ancient world, 2, the classical age, 3, the age of diverging traditions, and 4, the making of the European age. Now, I don't stipulate in there, but I would like you to certainly deal with different geographical areas. You say, well, wait a minute, how can I compare and contrast? It's difficult. This is a difficult essay because it's asking you to put it all together. Now, also I can say, look, do I have it put all together? Not really. It's still very much a work in progress. Every time I teach this course, I see new things. I change things in my own mind, my own understanding. And that affects how I view the world that I find myself in today. And I hope that is how this course has functioned and or will function for you, because we're all in this world together. That's one thing we can say. Every human being that we're aware of inhabits the planet Earth. That gives us some commonality. How do we go about living? How do we go about, getting along or not getting along? And what are the reasons for not getting along? If we just didn't, associate with each other, could we get along better than trying to form groups and societies and nations and states and everything else? What's it all about? How do we deal with what we're confronted with? You can say, well, yeah, but that's a huge question. It is, but in the other ways, it's a very simple question. How do we make it day by day? How do we live in some way that we want to live? And there I refer to the issue of happiness. Humans want to be happy. So, yeah, is that a characteristic? And what makes humans happy? There's no single thing that makes all humans happy. We all have basic needs. Humans have basic needs. We need food, we need water, we need shelter. It could be argued that we need companionship or a social context of some sort. We need protection. Those are all basic needs for human beings to live. And so there's the commonality of every individual of the species, that there are needs that allows every human being has these needs that allows them just to survive. Is that what we're looking at? And then somehow, is that the commonality? Survival? And are the various diversity conditions in which humans have developed to survive, is that what makes for the diversity? Or is it cultural? Or is it geographical? As we adapt to our environments, Say, okay, what do you mean adapting to our environments? That's looking at early developments. No, we're adapting to our environments constantly. Think of the challenges of global warming. How are we going to adapt to that? And you can say, well, we're not going to. We're going to stop it. Well, really? We can pass legislations and restrictive legislations to cut down on all the causes that we have unleashed on the planet that has been damaging it for so long and now perhaps irreparably that will end up killing us all. But you know what? That's not adapting. That is simply trying to deal with the problem, how to stop the negative input. And let's say we all of a sudden we cut greenhouse gases and emissions and pollution and all those things. And so global warming stopped as of right now. That's going to take some time. And we're going to have to adapt to the new situation. How are we adapting? How are we adapting to rising temperatures? If sea levels rise and if some coastal areas are submerged, how are we going to adapt? How have humans adapted? And how can we find happiness adapting within a rapidly changing culture? Or we just all become dinosaurs and don't adapt. It's okay, well, the dinosaurs were hit by an asteroid. Whatever, I'm not trying to argue for the reasons of the extinction of the dinosaurs. But it's a general kind of principle or rule out there that is not necessarily tested scientifically. But if population species don't adapt, they die. How do we adapt? On what basis? That is where the creativity comes in of human beings. That's where the generosity comes in of human beings. How do we deal with it? When we start to realize that this is not all about me and what I want and what can I get, how can I be happy? It is about human beings as such. How do we balance this thing, the different needs and desires? How do we get along? That's a big question. You say, yeah, don't we work that out in childhood? No, we don't, obviously. We're on a different level. But in so many ways, conflicts of children, either with siblings or within kindergartens or first grades, and there's squabbles, and you have to learn how to get along with other children. It hasn't changed. Just the things we squabble about and the weapons we use to try to get what we want are bigger and more devastating, and we do more damage and hurt more people in the process. If we all could be happy, what would that look like? What would the world look like if we all could be happy? If every individual could be happy? If we had all that we needed? If we had all that we wanted? Is it then desire for more than we need? Is that what fuels the division? The diversity as division and opposition rather than as inclusion and equity? I don't know. And no one's going to be able to answer that question definitively. And certainly none of you are going to be able to answer that question definitively in an essay of 7 to 10 pages minimum, or even as I suggest on the guide to writing the file in 60 pages or 100 pages. It's an unanswerable question because the answer no one will ever live to see, because it would have to be the answer would have to be valid for all time. But anyway, that gets into other philosophical aspects, which go back to the first part of this course in the lectures. Because what is history after all? If we view the world as various attempts to come to some sort of mutual understanding where we all can be happy, why is that a goal? How does that affect how we view the development? That's the other part of this question, is to reflect on your own answer. To say, okay, here we go. Here's how I put it all together. And then stop a minute and think, okay, why do I do it that way? Why am I plotting it that way? Is how we view the world? Does that determine how we portray the world? Portray the past? The concepts we use? Our beliefs about our own being and existence in the world in which we find ourselves? If we were to take, and here's just a couple of very uh, common examples. Histories, I think this will come as no shock or surprise to you, has traditionally been very male centric and Western centric. Okay. If we were then to write the history of world perspectives, if we were to write this textbook, but doing so from a lower class Chinese female peasant, what would it look like? Or from, um, you know, a lower class Native American. Almost pick your trap. It's not like all Americans, Native Americans were the same. We know that wasn't the case, except from outside. They're all Indians. No, they weren't any more than all Americans are the same thing. Californians are completely different from Floridians, and they're both completely different from New Yorkers. And on we could go. I don't need to demonstrate that. And the same thing with Europeans. We could even go down to micro levels in terms of what accounts for, in some ways, this diversity and unity. Unity and harmony and difference, and how do we manage those things? And the terms that we use to describe it affects how we do describe it, because that textbook on perspectives of the world to 1800, written by that female Chinese peasant, is going to look very different from the textbook that you have now finished reading, or from my lectures. What difference does that make? I would argue it simply makes for an awareness. An awareness, though in some ways we're all in this together. So it's not that the female perspective is inherently better or more right than the male perspective, or the child perspective, or the European perspective, or the Indian perspective. And here I don't mean Native Americans, I mean from India, or the Middle Eastern perspective. We have different perspectives on who we are and how we fit within this larger context of world history. It's not an issue of which is right or wrong. Another example, just in terms of perspectives, if you're a hardcore Marxist and you are convinced and believe that what explains world history and human conflict is the gap between capital and labor, between those who have the capital, have the wealth, and those who are trying to earn it and just simply scrape by a living. Now, there's a lot of evidence we could put forward that that is a very good thesis to at least describe a lot of human development, at least in the West. But if you think that is an overarching principle or law, that is what drives human beings and drives history, you're going to view things differently than if you view, let's say, the basic motivating factor that drives history is the search for freedom, the desire for freedom. It's like, is it really? Is it freedom? Is it the Marxist dynamic or something else? These are all ways that we need to be aware of that help us make sense of the world. I think I may have mentioned this earlier on, I'm not sure. They're all ideologies. I think I've defined ideology as simply the structures that allow us, the mental structures that allow us to make sense of the world. And that we all are ideological. We all have our perspective, like we're all biased. We all have our own perspective. We all have our own way of putting the world together. Is being human a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a neutral thing? Is living in this world friendly and hopeful and positive? Or is it oppositional? Is it something we have to fight, struggle and fight against? Those are two very different viewpoints, ideologies, that affect how those two different people, if they were to hold those and talk, how they would view the whole thing. There's not one single right answer. How do we negotiate all that? How do we deal with ourselves being human within the world context? That is what this question is getting at. And by now you may be saying, oh my God, I can never do that. And I would say, yeah, you can't. Neither can I. But we have to try. Because as soon as we start saying, I know the truth, I know this is the way it is, and I know this is the way it has always been, and I can prove it, that's the danger. When we think that we have come up with the absolute answer. That's why I want you to reflect on your answer. I want you to think about it. Put it together. It's not saying that, just throw it all up in the air and everything is relative and doesn't really matter. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. Everyone should have their convictions. But everyone needs to realize that their convictions are just that, they're convictions. And the issue is what to do about them and how to manage conflicting interpretations, as one scholar has called things, or conflicting ideologies that can lead to violence and conflict and can lead to destruction of human beings as such. That's what I hope we can avoid. Because I think there is something basic within human beings, something called the survival of the species, basic instincts, that no human being would say that human beings should all be wiped out, including me. Well, maybe there might be somebody. There could be somebody. That would be an ideology. So that is the trick of what this question is like. Going through the lectures, going through what is history, those early lectures on kind of the philosophy of history, of how we put it all together, because that's what this is getting at. How do we put it all together? What are the philosophical principles or assumptions that we make to our answers? Now, I could talk a lot about that. In fact, what is now a multi-volume, 5-volume work on history is trying to get at that question and that problem. And I think I have my answer. But those 5 volumes aren't all completely written yet, and I wouldn't assign them in this course or any other if they were. But it's my struggle. You can say, well, you're just trying to impose your struggle to figure things out on us when I already know it all. Fine. Question your feeling and assumption that you already know it all. That's what I'm getting at. And it's not necessarily to undermine that assumption, that belief, but to strengthen it, even if I disagree with it. Be informed, be aware, reflect, and question. And my conviction is that maybe, just maybe, this approach of questioning and reflecting, but doing so based on the evidence that is before our eyes and logic and what we can agree upon, will somehow mitigate the destructive, violent tendencies of humans when we're confronted with the other. Now, that was a lot of not just ideological, but idealistic labyrinth in some ways. And the practicality is you have to write a final essay that is worth as much as your other 4 exams. Be concrete, be specific. All along, I think I've said, the key is to relate the general comments and perspectives to the particulars, and the particulars to the general. If you make a statement that human beings have always desired to find a better life for themselves, give an example. And give examples from the ancient world, the classical world, the European hegemony world, or whatever, to show the diversity in diverse geographical areas and cultures and civilizations. Defend your statements. So it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And if we can relate the details to the overall structure, that's the key. And that's the goal. And that's the task that is awaiting you in your final essay. If you have any questions, please do, again, as always, contact me. Also, I would happily read drafts, first come, first served basis. I think I've addressed that issue so that if everybody sent me a draft on December 14th, I'm not going to get to them. That certainly is not a requirement. That is an offer. So, make use of it if you would like, and if you are able to, because I know you have other classes you're working on too. And good luck, and try to have fun with it. Which is not to say that it should be easy. It should be a struggle. You should struggle with this essay, but have fun with the struggle. Have fun with coming to your own understanding of the development of humans from the beginnings to approximately 1800, which is what this course is about, which is essential for coming to an understanding of who we are today and where we're going. Thank you so much. I very much look forward to reading your essays. I'm always open to communication, to emails, to Zoom meetings, about whatever. And that also will be the case even after you submit your final essay. Okay. Thank you so much. Good luck. And I'll see you around, I hope. Bye-bye.